Underground Season 2, Episode 4. It was live. It was super live though. Um, so much happened in this episode. We finally get a look at Kato. We don't really look too much at Rosalie or the Road Plantation, which was fine because we had enough of them last week, right? They were. I was tired after looking at the episode, so I can't imagine what, the actors actually felt after getting done with that episode. Let's get into it. First, we start off with Daniel. He was reading a letter for another slave. He didn't really want to read it at first because he was like, this is not a good time. The master's about to come out in a few minutes. But he went ahead and read it anyway. And it said something about John Brown, the raid that happened, and some slaves were going to get sold off. I think that was my understanding of it. Let me know if I'm wrong. And he said that, he was saying that something could happen. The slave ends up asking him to teach him how to read. And Daniel tells him it's not even about the risk, learning how to read is more about the weight of the words that you read being on you. He says that reading is a curse. I guess what he means by that is to know the words that are around him now and know, it makes the world that much smaller to know everything that's not everything that's going on, but to know more of what's going on. Moving on, we're going to go to London, England. And that is where Kato is. And this really surprised me because obviously last season we left him in a state we didn't know what was going to happen to him. But he had found the money, he found the money. So he's obviously used that to his advantage. They haven't explained everything, as far as like what made him end up in England in the first place. And we see him travel a few different places throughout the episode. He meets up with a woman, I'm not sure of her name. They're at an art gallery and they're talking about a sculpture that was donated by him. His last name, I guess, being Powell. We don't know. I don't know if that's his real last name or a name that he made up. I guess it really doesn't matter, but it was donated by him. And we come into contact with her again. I'm just going to go, I'm not going to go in order. I'm just going to go through the flashback scenes as it comes to my mind. He's spending time with her. They go out to a club. They were dancing and she hit him by mistake. And the man said something. I think he called her a pig. I'm not really sure what he called her. It was an insult and Kato got mad. She was like, calm down. He was like, okay, let's have one last drink. So he pours it for her and then he goes back and hits the man on the head with a bottle. And then she runs out of the club. He throws money in the air like, drinks on next round on me, and walks out. And I was like, I didn't know they could do that kind of stuff in England, but obviously it's a whole different culture, whole different setup. Follows her and she's mad because she's saying that, you got mad over an insult, like they're just words. It doesn't mean anything. And then basically the argument was about her not being able to know Kato, like he doesn't want to let anybody in. And that kind of stems from everything that he's been through. Obviously, like Kato's been through a lot. We don't know the full extent to what he's been through. She really wants to know him. She wants him to open up and he doesn't really want to, and he's telling her like, I'm a monster, and she's like, I'm not going anywhere. So that was a flashback scene that was like later on in the episode. Coming back to, and he was in England 4 months ago. So coming back to the present day, the sewing circle is having a meeting in a banner and it says slavery is a sin. They're going to be having a rally. They asked Elizabeth where the list is, and Elizabeth is like zoned out, obviously because of everything that's going on in her life. So Georgia tells the other women like, we can do this outside, and she looks at Elizabeth and she's like, if this is too much, just let me know if it's too soon. And Elizabeth brings out the list and she's like, no, it's not too much. I see that your name isn't on the list though to speak. And Georgia says, I'm a better behind the scenes person than I am an orator. And Elizabeth tells her, no, you inspire me, that you really should speak. So I guess Georgia somewhere along the line changes her mind and she decides that she is going to speak. We see that later on in the episode. while they're sitting there at the table, they hear a knock knock, and it's just like a light tap, and they're like trying to figure out where it's coming from. It's coming from inside the tunnel. They go to the tunnel and they find Rosalie almost dead in the tunnel, and they get her up to a room. They call the doctor. The doctor comes and he's like, he gives her some medicine. This is like the third time I think I've heard that name, Loudon, the name of the medicine that he gave her, and he just put 3 drops on her lips, and he said we'll wean her off when she comes to. And Elizabeth asks about the baby, like, will it affect the baby? And he says, I don't know, because I don't know what she's been through. And he says, you know, he'll keep her in his prayers, and he goes on his merry way. And Georgia says she's a fighter, you know, she's gonna come through it. And Elizabeth says she shouldn't have to. You know, this man, they beat this woman within an inch of her life, and she was pregnant. Georgia's like, I'm sorry. Basically, Elizabeth's just like, she's had it up to here with slavery, everything, like the whole institution of slavery, like she wants it to be done. And before she leaves, or before they cut out of that scene, she says, I can't lose you too. This show's almost always making me cry, but that was sad to me, because, you know, she really doesn't have any, like, I guess we don't see any of her family, so I don't know if she just had John, but she considers Rosalie family. Another important thing that Georgia said also, she said Mr. Brown's followers have, they have the same goal in mind, like they do want to end slavery, but they have different methods of ending slavery, and she doesn't really agree with their methods. She thinks that they're too volatile. Noah wakes up and he's at Cato's place. He gets dressed, he goes downstairs. Cato is there, he's fighting a man, and Noah asks him, what am I doing here? And Cato says, you're welcome. And Cato says, have you seen Philadelphia? I'm sure you haven't. Let's go out to lunch. So they go out to lunch. They sit at this restaurant, which to me was kind of weird, because I don't know if they were the only black people in there, but it was just weird. They're sitting in the restaurant, everybody's kind of looking at them, and Cato says, let's have an honest conversation. And so Noah's like, you know, basically not trying to hear it. He has a knife under the table, and Cato says, the way this ends is that you leave that slave girl to mourn you. That house girl, I'm sorry. You leave that house girl to mourn you if you try to kill me right now, because I got people everywhere. He had like 4 people in the restaurant with him. Noah is like, he puts the knife on the table, really angry, like, and Noah pretty much puts Cato in his place by saying that, where is your family in that big house that you have? You're in it all alone. Cato gets mad. He's like, you don't know anything about family. Well, I understand why Cato feels the way he feels. He was left last season not for dead, like Noah said. He threw him a weapon so that he could defend himself, so that he could get away, because at that time, like, it doesn't make sense for them both to have gotten caught. And I guess what Cato wants Noah to realize is that you were selfish. You were worried about yourself. You weren't worried about me. And I think Noah came to that realization later on in the episode. Basically, he was saying that, you know, Henry, Moses, he didn't say Zeke, because we all know how Zeke died. Their deaths were on me, and if he could do anything to change it, he would. They cut to a scene, and they're at a fight scene where the lady in London took him. I think they're actually in Ireland now. They went to Dublin, Ireland for the fight scene. And a man is punching, they're having a fight, and he wins the fight, and he said $100 for anybody who can take me. The girl all of a sudden out of nowhere lifts Cato's hand, and I was like, what? I was confused, because I was like, why in the world did she lift his hand? Like, did she not understand? Well, she didn't know what he had went through, but he had went through something very, you know, violent, and he was like, Cato had been fighting for his life, so the last thing he wants to do is, I feel, get in here and fight for fun. But he goes ahead and does it. He gets in the ring and he starts fighting, and I think he beats that man. And so there's another flashback scene of her and him, and he's in another fight, And the man, he basically wins the fight. The man comes back and punches him again, which I thought was completely unfair. I'm like, how are you going to have, after the fight has been called, and then you have this man come back and hit him, and he knocks him out. And so the girl is looking at him, and he's looking at the girl all hurt like, and in that moment I could tell that he was going to leave her. Like, it wasn't going to work out. I don't know how I could tell, but I could just tell from the look on his face, like, this is not what he wanted to do. So he gets back up finally, and he punches the man, and he looks at the girl, and she's crying, and he's about to cry, and it was just sad. But I just knew that it wasn't going to work out. I didn't know if she was going to leave him or he was going to leave her, which was, as we see, he ends up leaving her, and he has all his bags, and I guess he's going back to the United States. And she's mad, and she's like, all I'm worth is a deed to your house. And she says, I thought you wanted better. And he says, I do. And that's all he says. You know, that's completely Kato's style, to not give a reason. But I honestly feel like maybe he didn't want to not spend the rest of his life fighting, but he wanted to go back to the United States. Maybe he just came over to Europe to, like, get away from what was going on, get away kind of from a reality, and then come back to the United States and deal with all the past trauma and everything that he had been going through. I think that's what happened. I'm not sure, but he could have gave her more of a reason. I understand why she was frustrated. So many times in real life that happens to women. So I definitely understand why she felt the way she felt. He could have said more. But anyway, moving on. So he leaves her the deed to the house. We don't see her anymore. The fact that Kato knew French was interesting to me as well. Last I checked, in season 1, he couldn't read, because remember when they were taking out the freedom papers to give to that sheriff, and he was trying to figure out which one was his, but he couldn't read. So I'm just like, what? Not saying it can't be done, but I'm just like, he went from being, well, maybe he just couldn't read English. I don't know. Questions that need answers. Right before they found Rosalie, somebody came in and said John Brown's followers are on their way. So we're gonna go back to the sewing circle scene, in which Elizabeth is having a introduction to this man, and his name is Lucas, I believe. He's trying to explain to the sewing circle possibly why the rally won't work, and you don't speak to a Frenchman in Spanish, you speak to him in a language that he understands. And then Georgia speaks French, and she says you don't speak to him in anything at all because you don't speak French. I just thought that was funny. Such a heavy show, you know, moments that we find laughter. I think that's important. His main point is that people that are so violent against other people are not going to listen to you when you're just talking. The only language they understand is violence as well. So, don't know if I completely agree with that, but I definitely understand where he was coming from. You could tell he was attracted to Elizabeth because he asked her to chaperone him, and they were going to a voting place, and basically they were going to put someone in the spot that was not going to look favorably upon slavery, so they trashed the voting place. I'm not sure if I'm right or wrong, but that's my understanding of what happened at that place. I understand why he told her a lie. He made up that whole story about nothing, but he could have just told her, like, I don't need a personal reason to fight against something that is wrong. But instead he chose to lie, and I wasn't here for it. I was over it, and I was over him. Let's go back to the scene where Kato and Noah are having lunch, and Kato tells Noah that you will have the opportunity to change things if you really want to. It cuts to the nighttime, and there are some slaves standing in front of Kato. He says, if you willingly go with this slaver and put yourself back into bondage, these slaves will go free, and that's your opportunity to basically right your wrongs. And if not, then they will go back into slavery. And Noah looks at him like he's crazy, and he says no. And I was kind of surprised that he said no, but at the same time, if I was put in that situation, I don't know if I would say no. I mean, I don't know if I would say yes. I'm sorry, because I'm already free at this point. you know, I can make a life for myself. But I definitely understand why he said no. There's some selfish in all of us. Noah is a good guy though at the end of the day, and I feel like Kato was trying to bring out the bad in him, and not saying that he didn't do some things that he shouldn't have done, like nobody's perfect, but at the end of the day, Noah is a good person. But I think Kato was trying to show him that you're more selfish, you're more like me than you think. And they get into a fight because I guess Noah is mad. He's mad with himself for saying no. And so they get into a physical altercation. At the same time, they're cutting the scenes of Elizabeth on the stage and she's giving a speech. Georgia had gotten up to give the speech, but for some reason, I guess she got stage fright and she ran off the stage. So Elizabeth takes the speech and she starts reading, and she starts yelling to get her point across. Somebody gets mad. I couldn't tell how the crowd was taking it, but they didn't seem to be really taking it that well. Somebody got mad and they threw something at her head and she starts bleeding, and she was about to retaliate, but Georgia comes to her side and she's like, no, don't throw it back. Basically, if you throw it back, then you're just like the rest of these people. Like, they're all selfish, basically. Which is the selfishness in this episode was a running thing. After Noah and Kato finish fighting, Kato says take him away, and they take Noah to see William Still. So I guess Mr. Still is in Philadelphia, because they were in Philadelphia, and they have a conversation, and Mr. Still is like very impressed by Noah because he got all these people to freedom and everything like that. Well, not all these people. He was able to get Boo and Rosalie onto freedom, but everybody else, you know, Kato had to fend for himself. And Noah says that I'm not a hero. At this point, he's feeling bad because Kato has pointed out to him and made it clear to him that you're just as selfish as me at times, but you think that I'm such a bad person, which I understood why Kato, you know, pointed that out to him. After all that, we thought that, well, I thought that those slaves were actually going to go back into bondage, but Kato freed the slaves anyway, and so they were on their way to Canada. The last scene that we see is Kato saying that everybody is like him, everybody is selfish, and he came back to, I don't say he came back to destroy America, he came back to try and help and do what was right. I hope he came back to try and find his family. I hope that his family is still out there. Mr. Still tells Noah that when you decided to run, you gave those slaves a choice to even be free, because before the choice or the option wasn't there. And I think Noah finally understood and came to terms with that. This episode opened up a lot of questions, how Kato got where he got as far as the help is concerned, because he said money can buy you a lot of armed friends. And he was in London at one time. He was in Paris at one time, and then he was in Ireland at one time. So he went to, you know, when he was in Europe, he went to a lot of different places. Hopefully all will be explained in the next episode. Thank you guys as always for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.